G'day Jafffa Adventures, Terry King here. Welcome to the channel. If you watched my last couple of videos on the brakes on the 200 series, you would have noticed this. That's the handbrake of the 200 series, and those pads are pretty much toast, and it's all pretty rusted out and crusty. I've got myself some new handbrake shoes now, and I'm going to install those. Now the handbrake system on Landcruisers are notoriously poor. Now no laughing or chuckling. If you want to see me restore the handbrake on this 200 series and get it into an operable condition, stick around. Of course, the first thing that you're going to want to do is jack the car up and take the tire off. Now, my recommendation would be to jack it up and take both tires off, because you're going to have to turn these discs independent of one another. And if you've got one tire on the ground, then you're fighting that limited slip diff, and it's just a little bit more difficult to turn. When you got both tires in the air, they'll freely rotate. Now, our aim is to pull the drum off, because the park brake shoes sit in behind here. Now, to get this drum off, we'll need to pull this caliper off. And there's two 17 mil bolts holding this caliper on the back side. So let's pull those off now. Now these can be a bit of a bear to get off. Just like that one, so I'll need a breaker bar. Now we got ourselves a little bit of leverage. Oh, man. Let's try this bottom one. Oh, whew, that was tight. Man, I don't know who did those up. Probably me, but they were on their well. Now, once we have our two bolts off, we pull the caliper off. That might just take a little bit of prying, especially if you've got a lip on the rotor, just through normal wear and tear. That's it, caliper off. Now, because I've got both tires jacked up and the car's in neutral, you can see how easy this is to turn. And that's the way you want it. Okay, now to get this drum off, if it doesn't just pull off with your hands, which mine does not, you may need to do one of two things. The first is to back the shoes off inside of this drum, because if they're tightened up close to the edge of the drum, they can also catch on a lip on the inside of this drum and cause you a world of hurt trying to get it off. To back those shoes off, there's a little inspection hole here. And in behind here is the adjuster with a star wheel. What you want to do is you want to hook that star wheel with your screwdriver and wind that so that it comes off. Hello, Sonny. Thank you for destroying the video. Well done, mate. Now it's a little bit of fishing to find out where that wheel is, but it's on the bottom here and it'll be slightly offset. There, I can feel the star wheel there. So it looks like this one is on the back side of the drum, just slightly rearward of center. And you'll be able to tell whether you're turning that star wheel the right way or the wrong way, because if these shoes bind up as you're moving it, then turn the star wheel in the opposite direction. You want to get this as free as possible. Now, once you've backed your shoes off, I still can't get this disc drum combination off, which means I'm going to have to run these two bolts in these two holes here to push the drum off the face of that hub. And you just want to tighten them down roughly the same amount so that the drum pulls off square. And there, you heard it, she just cracked. And here comes the disc drum now. Voila. So now that I've got this drum slash disc off, the things that can be holding this thing on, as I said, a little bit of a lip here on the inside of the drum, and this shoe catches that lip and can sometimes bind it up. You have to back that adjuster off there. And that's the star wheel we were trying to get with our screwdriver through that inspection hole. That star wheel is just rearward of the 180 degree mark, and over on the driver's side, it's the same. So that'll take some guesswork out of it for you. Now the first thing I'm going to do is take these shoe retainers off. Now you can get them with a pair of pliers. You just put your finger here behind the disc, because there's a pin that runs through there, and you compress the spring and turn the keeper. I got a special tool, however, to do this, so I'm actually going to use that because it's so much easier. And that's it. There's the cap, there's the spring, and there's the pin. And that just has a little slot that it slots in and turns. And that's what you're trying to do when you take it off. There's two of these. There's one on the back shoe and one on the front shoe. Now those shoes are just sort of flopping about there at the moment because those retainers are off. The next thing I'm going to do is take that spring off on the bottom near this little star wheel adjuster. Just note how that's oriented. These hooks here are facing backwards. Once we've done that, we can split the bottom shoes. And I can take that little adjuster out. Again, note the way that that's clocked. This end here with the threads is facing the backside. And now once we've got all of those components off, I can get this last spring, which is the toughest of the lot, and unhook it out of the shoe. So there's our back shoe done, and there's our front shoe off. And there is our spring. Again, the hooks are oriented towards the backing plate. Now that I've got the entire park brake mechanism off, I just do a real quick inspection to make sure that everything's hunky-dory here. And what I'm looking for in particular is whether I've got any grease weeping out from the seal on the back of this hub. And on this car, it's a little bit dirty, but it is nice and dry, so I don't have a weeping seal on the back of this hub yet. That's great news. Now here are the park brake shoes I bought. There you can see the part number. I don't know anything about this Protex brand. I just went into my local auto parts supplier, which happened to be a Burson, and said, give me some park brake shoes for 200 series, and this is what I got. All right, let me open those up and compare them to the shoes I took off the car. Now there's our new shoe. Of course, the shoe on the bottom is the old one. The holes all line up, which is great. The length of the braking material is the same on the new shoe and the old shoe. And interestingly enough, both shoes are ambidextrous. So what I mean by that is that can either go onto the back side or onto the front side of the drum. Typically with drum brakes as the primary means of stopping, so a drum brake car, we're not talking handbrakes now, the shoes will be different. The front shoe and the rear shoe will be different, both in terms of mounting and also in terms of the length of material on the shoe itself. It's different for the front and the back shoe. In this handbrake application, looks like it's identical, so you can't go wrong, can you? Now what I'm going to do is take the brake components that I've taken off, and I'm actually going to clean them up on a wire wheel and re-grease them. This one in particular is important because these are moving parts. You can see that slides off and there's a little bit of white grease on there. I'll re-grease that sucker. And this end here is threaded, and mine at the moment is locked up completely. Okay, there's our adjuster all cleaned up on the wire wheel. Now I'll lubricate that and put it back together. That's good, nice and free, no binding. That's good, nice and free, no binding. Now spin this thing up so that it's in its compressed position or its shortest length, because that's where you're going to start your adjustment from with the new shoes. Okay, backing plates all cleaned up, ready for reassembly. First thing I'm going to do is reassemble these shoes here on the floor. Now you'll remember that that screwed end was facing rearward, and this little spring had its little hooky bits facing towards the backing plate, just like that. I'll lift our shoes up in place, like so. Beautiful. Now put my little pin retainers back in. Make sure we orient our gap correctly. There we go, shoe retainer number 1. Okay, that's the second retainer. Last thing to put in place is this spring. Done. Now just double checking. We've got retainer number 1, retainer number 2, top spring oriented correctly, bottom spring oriented correctly, and our little star wheel adjuster oriented correctly. That's it. We're ready to throw the drum back on this thing. Now if you are going to use your original rotors, and I don't recommend that, but anyway, if you are, I would at least get yourself some emery paper. Do that, and try and clean that mating surface where the shoes hit this brake drum. Try and take that rust off as best you can. You can get these things machined and turned. I don't know how much that costs, but if you'd need to do that, for me anyway, I would probably just end up replacing the entire drum/rotor. Okay, now we put our rotor/drum back in place, and it could be a bit of a tight fit. You got to make sure you got that adjuster backed off all the way. There we go. You can just hear the shoes contacting the inside of that drum. Now what I'm going to do is go into this little inspection hole here and tighten those shoes up so that that drum is locked in place. And as I said before, it's a bit of a fishing exercise to find that little star wheel, but you'll get it eventually. Those shoes are pretty bloody tight on there now. So I'm going to back that star wheel off. Now this is a little bit of a suck it and see exercise, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to adjust those brakes up as close to the inside of this drum as possible without locking that drum up. And if you've got a little bit of resistance on there, like I do there, you're probably pretty close. Now once I've got both disc/drums back on, I come into the cabin here and give the handbrake a pull. And give it a pull a few times to set those shoes down. Then we come back to the drum and give it another spin. And I'm feeling for that resistance. And that's spinning a little bit free for me. So we're going to tighten that drum up a little bit more. Find your star wheel. Give it a couple of turns in the upward direction. Give it a wiggle. If you need a bit more, give it a bit more. That's pretty good right there. I've got a little bit of resistance and you can hear the shoes on the inside of the drum, and that'll just help bed those in a little bit when I first take off in the car. Now I'll do the exact same thing on the other side of the car, check it for its rolling resistance, and once I'm happy with that, the handbrake's going to be set up pretty much as best as it can here at the back of the car. We can also do some adjustments in the cabin, which I'll show you in a second. So I'm in the car now and I want to test this handbrake. We're back down on the ground, it's started, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 4 clicks that I can put on it. That's pretty bloody good. I'm actually going to keep it there. And now if my lever was pulling up too far, but my brake drums at the back were adjusted correctly, I can take this panel off here, and at the back of this lever is an adjusting screw, and you can take a little bit of slack out of the cable with that adjusting screw. So if you find that you've done your shoes up in the brake drums as basically as tight as they'll go, and this is still way too sloppy, take that panel off and adjust that up. I don't need to do that, and unfortunately guys, I'm not going to sacrifice the time to show you guys how to do that, but it's dead easy. Just pop that panel off, screw in behind here. That's actually holding it pretty good. You know, I got to get the revs up over 1,000 RPM before it'll start to move. Again, it's not the most flash thing in the world because it is a Toyota handbrake, but hey, it's not bad, and it's better than it was before. Well, there you have it, folks. I've taken a completely useless Toyota handbrake and turned it into a moderately useful Toyota handbrake. I trust you learned something in that whole process. Stay tuned for more maintenance videos on the 200 series. In the meantime, everybody, look after one another and keep the shiny side up. Bye now.